Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl in your face while you're sleeping.
Weird things they didn't teach you about ancient Egypt. Egypt is a land of pyramids and pharaohs, tombs filled with glittering treasures and powerful men who ruled a country like gods. When we think about ancient Egypt, we think about the wealth and glamour of kings, but we usually leave out the dirty and disgusting details. But where your schools and teachers failed to give you the information, we step in. So here are some weird, scary, and even disgusting things they did not teach you about life in ancient Egypt. Number 12. Life of servants. Some people have heard before of the legend that the servants of pharaohs and other important figures in ancient Egypt history were often ritually murdered and buried alongside the deceased so they could serve them in the afterlife. Many today would tell you this is entirely a mythology about the Egyptians, but the truth is actually far more disturbing. While the practice of killing servants and hiding them in your burial chamber was phased out in the latter days of ancient Egypt, retainer sacrifices were once a regular part of their society. Those who were sacrificed this way would not necessarily feel that they were being murdered, though. The ancient Egyptians had a complicated relationship with death and were obsessed with carrying on with life after death. In a way, they were far more obsessed with life than they were with death. Those servants who were sent to die and be buried with their masters were considered privileged to be allowed to follow a powerful figure into the afterlife to serve them. However, it was still likely nerve-wracking to know that your fate was tied to the random death of a person you work for.
Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that will take just 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell and you get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it. It really works.
Number 11. Hair lice. Most people shaved their heads in ancient Egypt. We know this from pictures and from records written by people in other countries who looked at Egypt's fashion choice and puzzled over why Egyptians thought going bald was such a good look. Today, though, historians are pretty sure they know why. Lice were everywhere in ancient Egypt. The tombs of Egyptian rulers are infested with lice, apparently flooding out from the remains of the bodies. The ancient Egyptians had lice remedies, but they either didn't work or weren't worth the hassle. Most people got so fed up with the nationwide infestation that both men and women shaved every hair clean off their bodies. Women usually wore wigs, hair that could be discarded when it got infested, while some others just went around completely shaved from head to toe. Number 10. Men were weird. Catcalling isn't a new invention. Women today might get frustrated when a man whistles or yells out a lewd comment, but that's nothing compared to what women in ancient Egypt endured. The Greek historian Herodotus watched Egyptians get together for a religious festival. Men gathered their families together into boats and sailed toward the city of Bubastis for a deeply spiritual and sacred ceremony. But going to a sacred ceremony didn't stop men from flashing girls on the way. According to Herodotus, the men would, quote, cry aloud and jeer at the women, and pull up their garments as they passed through towns. Apparently, the men held on to the distant hope that a girl might get so excited that she'd jump into the water and swim after them. Number 9. King Tut's death. King Tutankhamun was only 19 years old when he died, and nobody knows for sure what happened. His death is a complete mystery, but not because he was in his prime of his life. The reason that Tut's death is such a mystery is that there were so many things wrong with him that it's hard to tell which one finished him off. King Tut was in terrible health. He had malaria, for one thing, and he was born with so many genetic disabilities that historians are convinced his parents must have been brother or sister. He had a club foot and genetic defects that, some believe, may have made his death nothing more than a matter of time. He also had a fractured skull that, for a long time, was thought by archaeologists to be a sign that he'd been stabbed in the head. Today it's believed that his head just got damaged while the body was being embalmed, but the possibility that he had been murdered hasn't been ruled out. He broke his knee shortly before he died, too, which has led to a theory that he was killed in a chariot accident. If he was, though, getting on the chariot in the first place was a strange decision. Tut was so deformed that he couldn't even stand without someone propping him up. It could have been anything, or it could have been a whole slew of different things affecting him at once. The only thing we know for sure is that if a king lived like that in ancient Egypt, what would have life been like for the others? And you just can't believe what we have next on our list. Number 8. King Tut burial. When Howard Carter found the untouched tomb of King Tutankhamun, he discovered a wealth of treasures and relics the like of which historians had never seen before. The world was abuzz with writings of every single thing found in there, except for one little detail that usually gets left out. King Tut's mummy was buried with an erection. Nobody knows exactly why, but Tut's the only Egyptian ruler we've found so far who insisted on being mummified with a raging heart-on. There are a lot of theories, some crazier than others. According to one theory, the erection might not actually be his. Just imagine riding a chariot with an erection and dying if the theory we told you on the last entry was true about his death. Number 7. Egyptian birth control. Egyptians had their own ways of practicing Planned Parenting. For the time, there were amazing innovations that showed the ancient Egyptians had an incredible interest in and understanding of medicine. But that doesn't mean these methods weren't horribly disgusting. Women had a few options for birth control, including different mixtures for contraceptives. Some of the nicer ones involve honey, but the braver women mixed tree leaves and crocodile dung. Then the woman had to stick that concoction inside herself, or else deal with 9 months of pregnancy. Men weren't off the hook, though. They had male contraceptives that weren't much better. Men had to rub onion juice under their foreskins to keep themselves from having kids. It's not clear how many people actually used these contraceptives, but given the choice, the ancient Egyptians had a strong argument for staying celibate. Number 6. Necrophilia. When a man died in Egypt, he was embalmed right away. Women, though, were a different matter. By law, the beautiful and powerful weren't sent to the embalmers until they had decayed for 3 or 4 days. This was because Egyptians didn't trust the embalmers to keep their hands to themselves. This wasn't just paranoia. It was something that the Egyptians learned the hard way. An embalmer left in charge of mummifying a royal body was caught in the act by a co-worker. The co-worker ratted him out and the Egyptians learned from their mistakes. After that, Egyptian rulers didn't even trust their workers with dead women. Number 5. Obese pharaohs. Most drawings of pharaohs show them as thin, muscular people, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. The pharaohs ordered their artists to make them look pretty, but the real bodies we've found left behind tell a different story. Most members of the Egyptian royalty were massively overweight. Egyptian rulers had terrible diets. Their priests were ordered to prepare 3 banquets each day, all overflowing with wine, beef, and cake. They scarfed down food filled with saturated fats all day. Mummies have been found with clogged arteries, bulging bellies, and massive fat folds. Obesity was a reality for Egyptian pharaohs. They were so familiar with it that the Egyptians were already writing medical texts on the dangers of obesity as early as 1500 BC. Number 4. Egyptians and laxatives. Egyptian royals were very concerned about overeating. They might have been fat, but that didn't mean they wanted to be. Slim, muscular frames were still the beauty standard for Egyptian men, so they did what they had to do to keep themselves healthy. Most Egyptians would take laxatives 3 times each month. They used a laxative made of castor oil and then got ready to spend the rest of the day on the toilet. This was before plumbing, of course, so that meant they had to clean up their mess by hand afterward. There wasn't a problem they couldn't fix with laxatives. Even diarrhea was treated with laxatives. Apparently, the idea was to get the disease out of their bodies by force and get through the whole mess as quickly as possible. Number 3. Egyptian proctologists. Medicine was a major part of ancient Egyptian culture, and they made some incredible advances for their time. Like we do today, ancient Egyptians had doctors for each body part of the body. They had dentists for their teeth, optometrists for their eyes, and of course, proctologists for their backside. Or, to translate the Egyptian word for proctologist, literally, shepherds of the anus. Proctology had only come so far at the time, so the job of a shepherd of the anus mostly consisted of giving people enemas. Proctologists were specialists who knew exactly how to concoct and administer medications that go up the buttocks and don't really do anything else with their time. The Egyptians were proud of their enemas. They even had a whole myth behind them. Enemas, they believed, were developed by the god of Thoth and then passed on to man, making Thoth a sort of Prometheus of the anus. Number 2. Fertility tests. Egyptians had a whole medical system for giving birth. They had ways to test fertility and pregnancy that were truly advanced for their time and incredibly weird. To test fertility, some doctors would rub oil all over a woman's body and tell her to lie down until the morning. If she looked, quote, fresh and good, they ruled that she was fertile. If she didn't, they said she wasn't fertile. Others did something a bit weirder. A doctor would put a clove of garlic or an onion inside a woman's vagina. In the morning, he'd smell her breath. Ancient Egyptians believed that every orifice in a woman's body was linked, and that their mouths had tubes that went all the way down. If the doctors could smell the garlic, then the tubes were clear, and the woman was fertile. But if the doctor couldn't smell garlic, the tubes were blocked, and the woman couldn't give birth. Number 1. Menstruating men? Ancient Egypt was plagued with diseases. In particular, schistosomiasis infected nearly everyone there. It's an illness that makes people feel sick and causes blood in the urine and stool. It was so common they didn't even realize it was a disease. Ancient Egyptians got schistosomiasis so often that they had thought they were menstruating. They accepted that men had to menstruate just like women, and they accepted the blood coming out of their bodies as a normal part of growing up. Peeing blood was even treated as a bit of a good thing. They believed that a man who menstruated was fertile. To the Egyptians, there was no better sign that a man was ready to father a family than being infected with parasitic worms.